It's August the 2nd of 2010. We're in Washington, D.C. And the worst part of D.C. is an area known as the 7th Ward. The 7th Ward is high crime. It is violent. It is drug dealers.
All right, bye, Keisha.
Bye.
Bye.
Letitia Frazier, she's 18 years old. She's a fry cook in a McDonald's in the 7th Ward. Letitia's mother and her sister are waiting for Letitia to come home.
So it was planned that everybody would meet up, and she's supposed to be there, but she didn't show up. And we calling, phone just going straight to voicemail. It was too many signs that just wasn't normal.
Developing in the district tonight.
Letitia Frazier disappeared
after leaving her job at McDonald's.
Letitia Frazier went missing last summer.
Classified this as a critical missing person.
The fact that my little sister is missing is a stressful situation.
Police have not yet recovered a body.
That's what I feel, truthfully, that it's foul play.
Where is Letitia? No one seems to know.
Jackie Middleton, Parker.
I joined the Metropolitan Police Department in October of 1986. It's every officer's desire to become a detective, the top tier. A homicide detective gets to investigate the most heinous crime there is. You get to hunt the beast.
Jackie Middleton is a great detective. And Jackie was great because of her rapport with people. She can calm people. She was passionate. She knew how to turn a switch off and on when it was needed, and she could be tough.
At the time, I had transferred from homicide and was working in the 7th District.
Middleton.
Jackie Middleton was a well-experienced missing persons investigator and a well-experienced homicide detective. She's summoned to the front lobby of the precinct building to meet Letitia's mother and her sister and the father.
Do you have kids?
Just don't give me somebody to get help me.
Fill out
the paperwork first.
Our daughter is
Come on and help, man.
okay.
Look, I understand.
Hey,
we got you.
Hey.
So I spoke with the family, and they were complaining about Letitia being missing.
They are more than alarmed. They need help to find their loved one. And the most obvious place to look for the help is the police department.
Y'all come with me. Y'all come on to the back. I'll help you find your daughter. Y'all come on. Come on back.
And that was the beginning of the relationship between the Campbell Fraziers and myself.
So we sat down and Jackie talked to us. She kind of calmed us down and, made us feel comfortable about them looking into our daughter's case.
First question we always ask is, has she ever ran away?
We say no, she never ran away, because that's not Tisha, Tisha always came home when she got off work and did what she had to do for Diamond and everything.
Who's Diamond?
Tisha's daughter.
I'ma get you.
Letitia left behind a daughter, Diamond, who was 3 at the time.
Oh, Diamond. Her and her mother was like a team. Only time she wasn't with her mother is when her mother was at work or school. But outside of that, they was together all the time, hooked to her hip.
When you're the mother of a small child, you come home to care for that child. If she's not home, it's because she can't come home. Nobody leaves a child behind. Nobody.
No, something's definitely happened.
Okay, listen, guys, we'll find her.
The concern is that she's not missing, but she's been harmed in some way.
I treated this case as if it was a murder from the very beginning.
Thank you.
We've got to proceed quickly to find out where this girl is. The longer she's missing, the more danger she's in.
And so first thing that I thought we needed to do was speak to the last person who saw her.
So Middleton goes to the McDonald's. speaks to the manager.
We wanted to find out if she had any problems with anyone on the job. Were there any customers she was having issues with?
Letitia, she's one of my best employees.
They all like Letitia. They admire her for her willingness to advance herself.
She worked hard. Once she graduated high school, she wound up working for McDonald's, and also she was getting her culinary arts degree. She loved cooking, so I know being a chef was one of her things that she wanted to do eventually.
Did Letitia have any problems here last night?
Nothing I can think of.
Nothing that's out of the ordinary. One coworker sees her leave to go to the bus as is usual.
So we received information that she got on the P bus, which is the bus that she rode home all the time.
Detective Middleton, Metro PD.
So Middleton identifies the driver on duty that night.
Yeah, I just wonder, have you seen this girl?
Yeah, she rides this bus all the time.
Do you remember seeing her last night?
The bus driver says that she was with a man. Now, that's interesting. So who was this man? Middleton goes back to the family with the description provided by the bus driver, and the mother immediately says, oh, that's her boyfriend, Rynell Mills, and that he rides the bus with her sometimes.
How's work?
They will always be together. They kind of like grew up together.
Something goes wrong between people that are romantically involved. It can be a very emotional and thus a very dangerous thing.
Historically, when you have cases like this, it's the boyfriend or the husband.
That's the first person you're going to look at. Probably 9.5 times out of 10, it is that person.
So Middleton finds her boyfriend. He's also very concerned because this is out of character for Letitia to not make contact.
I need you to tell me about the meetup with Letitia on the bus.
After work, she normally get on the bus with me, ride the bus every day.
Apparently, he had met her coming from work. She said she was going to meet some friends. She got off in the area of 22nd Street, and he continued to go home.
It is her custom to call him every night to say that she got home safely. But that night of August 2nd, she never called.
Are you willing to take a polygraph test?
Yes.
I am not the person that did the polygraph. The polygrapher views the case and they ask questions about, when's the last time they saw them? Do you know what happened? Did you cause the disappearance? Things of those nature. There was no deception. There was nothing that raised the radar that this is our guy. We did verify this story, so things were lining up.
Can you think of anybody who may know where Letitia is?
Did you talk to Marcus?
Who's Marcus?
Diamond's daddy.
He is the biological father of Diamond. He thus becomes a suspect.
Even if the father is not dating her at the time, there's going to be disputes because the child is involved. So as a detective, you most definitely want to first start there.
So Marcus, what have you been doing? Let's go ask him. Middleton's interview with Letitia's boyfriend yields the identity of someone else, the father of Letitia's child, Diamond. So Middleton needs to find Marcus and see what explanation he has for the disappearance of Letitia Frazier.
We went to his house and he was interviewed.
Marcus, so what was your relationship with Letitia like?
It was fine.
They were trying to co-parent. They're children. They had this baby when they were like 15 and 16 years old, so they're doing the best they can.
Were y'all having any problems over Diamond or anything like that?
Nah, everything was cool.
He's very cooperative and willing to submit to any testing whatsoever.
We were able to get him to take a polygraph.
And he passed that with flying colors.
We talked to a lot of people. We couldn't find anybody to say that it was volatile or there was any issues or that he would have done anything to her.
So Middleton has no reason to believe that he has anything to do with her disappearance. Good for him.
So after we ruled out the obvious, we started looking to people that she trusted. Her boyfriend said she got off the bus, communicated that she was going to stop and see some friends. So naturally, we want to talk to these kids that she was supposed to be going to see.
Middleton has determined a group of friends exist. They listen to music, they play video games, they all like Letitia, they're all friendly with her. They are Brian Gaither, Johnny Sweet, and Lainey Bell.
Did you guys see Letitia the night she disappeared?
No, she never showed up.
And of course, nobody didn't see her. She never made it to the apartment.
So, Letitia, was she having any problems with anybody?
No, Tisha was cool with everybody.
She was never involved in like craziness. She loved to have fun, always kept a smile on her face. Like, even at a moment where she might be hurting, she's still smiling.
Everybody said that Letitia Frazier lit up a room.
She just smiled all the time, and you know, she was really friendly to people, and they gravitated to that.
Tisha had her stuff together, man.
So makes sense.
Everybody painted her to be a very genuine, nice, caring, responsible young lady.
All Middleton has learned is how concerned everyone is, but nobody really has any knowledge. Letitia has vanished, and no one seems to know how that might have happened. In a case like this, what makes it even more difficult? You have a 4-year-old child who wants to know where her mother is, and you can't tell her. You'd love to be able to, but you cannot.
There's a lot of emotional things start going on within her. You want to help, but you really can't. But she's missing that void. I know that took a toll on her.
The longer it takes to find her, the less likely it becomes that she will be found unharmed. Someone has done something awful to Letitia Frazier.
So as we started interviewing people in the neighborhood.
Cameras in the neighborhood is very important.
Hey, guys.
Because you never know who may have seen something.
Just want to know if you've seen this girl.
In a neighborhood like the 7th Ward, the code of silence is a problem. Never tell the police anything.
The 7th District is probably the roughest area of D.C. It's where the most violent calls come from. Majority of your shootings, majority of your homicides.
There's always been a lot of violence in that particular community, and people don't talk to the police.
There is a concern of being retaliated against for cooperating with law enforcement.
You don't want to get involved with the police. You don't want to bring any light to yourself, so you just say you don't know.
So we started posting flyers in the area that she kind of frequently hung around.
We stood out on the streets passing flyers to people in their cars, people walking the street.
We was all over. We was just throwing them around, putting them up everywhere.
Flyers would tear off phone numbers to Crime Stoppers. Anonymous reporting of information. You can even get a reward, and no one's going to ask your name.
But very shortly after we started putting them up, people would snatch them down.
Every day we would post flyers, and we'll come back the next day, they all will be gone. It didn't make sense to me.
Why would you pull down flyers of a missing person? Somebody's trying to find her. She has family. She has siblings. She has a mother. She has a father. She has a child.
So we was like, okay, what's up with this? Who is it that doesn't want us to figure this out?
So Carolyn, Letitia's mother, makes the decision it's time to get the press involved in this.
About a week or two after she went missing, that's when Sam Ford came in the picture.
Letitia Frazier disappeared in August. DC Bureau Chief Sam Ford is live in Southeast Washington with that story. Sam.
Well, Gordon, we are on 18th and Trenton Place in Southeast Washington, where 18-year-old Letitia Monique Frazier disappeared.
Sam Ford, take one. Mark.
I'm Sam Ford. I'm the principal reporter for Stories in Washington, D.C. The family would call saying that this young girl had disappeared, so I thought, this is interesting. Let's go.
Sam Ford had came through and he was actually doing a news clip on us. And I mean, he's a really good guy.
Caroline Frazier, the missing woman's mother, was back at 7th Police District headquarters again today, joined by a host of family members and friends who desperately want to know where Letitia Frazier is.
I mean, I've been out there every day, like I said.
Carolyn's going to prowl these streets with Sam Ford and a camera and see what they can learn that Middleton would never have access to because of the code of silence involving the police.
It was a lot of doors we knocked on and asked them, did they see Tisha out here and all that.
We got to know these people. We saw how serious they were. We felt for them, you know? They had the love for their child, and they just kept pushing and pushing and pushing.
While they continued to stay in the streets, we were trying to fish it out, trying to figure out who it was, but we just couldn't break anybody.
You know, we kept covering this story. And at one point, somebody started doing like ugly stuff on Facebook.
Not only do we have people tearing down the posters, now her sister LaToya is receiving threats via social media. They are awful threats.
Somebody made the Facebook page. It said Monique Frazier using her middle and last name. When they started in with the threats, until I had like a whole book of threats.
January 13th, 10:15 p.m. Your sister is dead and gone. I am watching you. One dead, more to go.
They was nasty. They called us everything in the book.
I'm gonna be honest, like I was terrified. Some of those messages was like horrific.
Her black has been gone. Keep the flyers out of the hood. We took them down.
The threat indicates that Letitia Frazier is already dead. It's clear to Middleton this is not a missing person, this is a homicide.
We were blown away. There's somebody who is saying that they know that she's deceased. So of course we want to interview that person. How do you know? What's your involvement?
So Middleton uses the IT services of the police department to recover the IP address of where these threats originated. They find the location where this IP is addressed.
We gear up, we go out to this address.
If their suspicions are correct, they may be finding a murderer there.
You've got to be kidding me.
We get there, it's a vacant lot. There's no house there where this address should have been.
They find nothing.
It's like somebody used an address that did not exist.
This is the curse of the internet. It gives everyone anonymity, the most dangerous of all things. Step out here in the sunlight, tell me your name and your mother's name, and then repeat what you were going to say a minute ago, and people won't do it.
And then after that, we continued to pass out flyers, try to interview people, but we came up with nothing.
This investigation has gone on for almost 6 months. There is hardly any hope that Letitia Frazier is alive and well.
I think after those months of passing out flyers, my mind at that point just went to mush because it's like I knew something had to happen.
All I could do was just close my eyes and really pray, because I couldn't do nothing else.
No one gets to play God. The family deserves to know what happened to their daughter. Every family does.
You had this wonderful person missing and nobody saying anything. You have to put your boots to the ground, as I say, lever to the pavement.
Hey, I'm just Detective Middleton out here looking at the kids.
Talk to people. Eventually, you're gonna reach the heart of someone. Someone's heartstrings will be pulled. And they will tell you what you need to know.
In January of 2011, Caroline Frazier was still on local news, passing out missing person flyers for Letitia Frazier.
Middleton.
On every flyer, we put out call crime solvers with your tip.
Okay, hold on. What did they say exactly?
So someone called in and gave a tip.
They say they know what happened to Letitia Frazier, and further, they know who's responsible for it.
And everything just started falling together from that one call.
I need this girl down here right now.
One thing that is certain about murder cases, the truth finds a way of escaping. Despite Herculean efforts to prevent it, it still finds a way. Middleton is contacted by an anonymous informant. They say they know what happened to Letitia Frazier.
We were able to track that person down and basically told them that, it was important that you help.
Letitia's family need to know what happened to their daughter.
They couldn't give, the whole spiel of what happened, but they could give us who was there. And I just couldn't believe who was involved.
I was shocked.
The informant says that Letitia Frazier was murdered by her own friends, Johnny Sweet, Brian Gaither, and Laney Bell. The very same friends who Middleton interviewed and put on a performance of no knowledge of the event.
I was in awe because these people were her friends.
I heard it was some more people there.
The informant said there were 3 other people that were present at the time, so a total of 6 people.
It's not common where you have a murder that is committed by 6 individuals.
What are the odds of that?
Thank you.
They had different degrees of culpability, but arrest warrants were obtained for all 6.
You needed a big team of detectives to bring them in, round them up.
When you plan an arrest like this, the first thing is surveillance. You got to put eyes on these people. You can't guess where they are. You have to know.
That them over there?
That's our boy.
The arrest teams fan out.
We got eyes on the suspect.
Okay, let's make our move.
Coordinated on a radio, and it's time to hit it. And they apprehend everybody at the same moment.
Hands in the air, Johnny! Get on the ground! Up! What up?
Show me your hands! Police, down on the ground! Show me your hands! Down on the ground!
Get on the ground now!
Down on the ground! Now! Down on the ground!
Everyone is marched out in handcuffs, placed in a police car, driven to an interrogation room where they are alone. There's zero opportunity to discuss what they're going to say with anyone other than the police.
So how you want to do this?
Middleton is taking a calculated risk by rounding these people up. They don't have a provable charge against anybody. They need somebody to run their mouth.
We're just going to have to talk to them one at a time.
It only has to start with one. You break the surface tension of the glass, and the glass crumbles. The very same thing with humans. Break the surface tension, the lies fold.
All right, Johnny. I'm going to need you to tell me what you know about what happened to Letitia Frazier.
I got nothing for you, man.
I told you guys I haven't seen her.
I never saw her the night she disappeared.
Many of the individuals at first said they had no idea what they were talking about, and they had this code of silence.
It was amazing that these young people were able to keep it quiet that long, because young people run their mouths all the time. I mean, all the time.
There's an old expression in law enforcement: a secret can be kept between three people if two of them are dead. Secrets don't stay secrets. No one can maintain their silence. People suffer from diarrhea of the mouth. They always have, and they always will.
When you have a group of people involved in a crime together, now it's about playing everyone against each other. So they're not used to the harsh interrogations, the games we play to get confessions.
Well, that's not what he told me over there.
What did he say?
Our job is to get information from the suspects. We're allowed to lie in order to get to the truth. So when I say we play people against each other, so now I can go to one and say, this person's told me this. This person told me that.
Whatever she's telling you is a lie. That's not how it happened.
Well, then tell me how it did happen.
These were, far and away, the best interrogations that I had ever seen in my career then, and still are some of the best that I've ever seen now.
It was almost like art. It was like a picture being drawn. I mean, it was just fantastic.
Mitch has a great way of talking and communicating with people, and have a great way of getting people to want to talk to him.
That's the one you need to crack right there.
Why you say that?
Because I know her.
I told them that this young lady, oddly enough, was a member of my church at that time.
Anika Nelson was her name.
Jackie was telling us how to use church to our advantage to get her to confess.
She's religious. She has a sense of right and wrong. Pursue that.
Listen, young lady, I don't know how involved you were exactly, but I do know that you were there. So, I know that this is tearing you up inside, but trust me, the truth will set you free.
She can't deal with this anymore. She has to tell them the truth. Okay, you have the floor. What happened?
Tisha came over to Johnny's apartment after she got out of work.
She comes over to say hello to her friends. There's a confrontation that immediately occurs. She is accused of stealing $900 in cash out of Johnny Sweet's apartment. She is then immediately assaulted.
We all started hitting on her, and things just got out of hand.
It started off with the girls assaulting her, and then the guys got involved.
Then they all started hitting her, started kicking her.
It's an absolutely savage attack, something beyond the pale.
She was moaning, so they put a sock in her mouth.
They put duct tape over her mouth. They put a pillowcase over her head and place it in the closet. You leave her there. I mean, how's she gonna breathe?
What happened to Letitia's body?
I don't know. They got rid of the body somehow.
There's no body. So now we have to prove that person we're talking about is the person that was there.
It's very important to find physical evidence.
We need to find something like blood, like part of Letitia Frazier. It's critical to the case, absolutely critical. So Middleton takes the CSI crew with her to Johnny Sweet's apartment, and they go over this apartment with a fine-tooth comb.
If you don't clean up properly, there's always going to be evidence left behind.
They sprayed a chemical all throughout the bathroom to be able to see if they could find any traces of organic material.
Hit the lights.
But they couldn't locate any. There was evidence that the defendants had used bleach to clean up, and bleach ordinarily will destroy forensic material. So we thought that our chances of being able to find something was very slim.
What about in here?
Nothing.
The floor, looking at it, has been cleaned thoroughly with something. The difficulty is blood has a tendency to seep. It seeps between floor cracks, between wallboard and the floor.
All right, well, cut up the floor.
It was a big production. I remember that the evidence technicians had to have someone bring a circular saw to literally saw a hole in the floor so that we could try to use it for forensic testing.
So if there was blood in this closet, they're going to find it?
When you have concrete evidence to say, yes, it was her, she was here, it's almost like the smoking gun.
After 6 months of effort, now we are 2 inches away from putting these people in prison, but we have to get those last 2 inches. We must, or nobody's going to jail. Well, this is a 6-month investigation involving some very unpleasant people who've already lied to the police a number of times, and now one of them confesses.
Anika Nelson, she came forward and told the police what she knew about what had happened that day.
But there has to be evidence in support of your confession, which in this case is traces of Letitia Frazier in that closet. The forensic search is everything to this case.
Heard back from forensics.
Well, I'll be damned.
Middleton is thrilled to discover that the CSI team has recovered human blood from the closet under the floor.
So you need to do a comparison to see if this blood is related to Letitia Frazier. Well, how do you do that if Letitia Frazier isn't here any longer?
So Middleton goes to the apartment where she lived to recover some of her personal things to get a DNA sample from her toothbrush, her hairbrush, or any other device.
We moved, so we had to get rid of that kind of stuff.
There is nothing remaining that belonged to Letitia Frazier that might have some DNA sample on it. But that doesn't mean you're out of luck.
There may be another way.
You can take DNA from a family member to see if there was a match with the DNA recovered.
So they were going to swab us for the DNA.
At the time, in 2010, I had not heard of using the parental links in a no-body case to try to establish the existence of a homicide. This was one of the first times where that had happened.
So a chief swab is taken from the mother, one from the father. When that goes through the laboratory and comes back, it is in fact a match. The blood in the closet is the blood of Letitia Frazier. That is no question.
I already knew that something happened to her, but to get the confirmation that she's actually gone, like, my heart could have dropped to my feet. Like, my sister's gone. How do you get another little sister? That doesn't happen. You know, so it kind of tore me up a lot.
When Middleton first talks to these three people, Bell, Sweet, and Gaither, she knows little or nothing about this case. Now we have a different circumstance.
We had a sense of what happened. Now we had to corroborate that. So the detectives then go to Brian Gaither. He was a little bit of the leader of the group.
I don't know, man. I don't know what happened to that girl.
They all think they're smart. They're going to talk their way out of this. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're talking to an experienced homicide detective, not some guy on a city bus. And they're going to pick at you until you start to bleed. Then we're going to see how smart you are.
We know Letitia died inside of Johnny's apartment. And we know that you put her in the closet.
When you hit people with facts, you can't refute the facts.
I believe the more they realized that we had information, that's what helped make them start cracking.
Look, man, she wasn't supposed to die or nothing.
Brian Gaither realizes there's no way out of this for him, and he confesses his involvement and tells the story as to what happened.
Johnny said Tisha owed him $900, so he had to teach her a lesson.
So the plan was for Johnny Sweet to get her over there, and he had some young ladies who was part of their little crew who were going to beat her up.
They invite her over to the apartment, which is not uncommon.
Hey, what's up, y'all? I got some fries if anyone's hungry. Why y'all slamming doors?
And before anything can be said, an assault begins with Letitia Frazier as the focus.
And it just went out of control.
It's like watching a group of jackals attack an animal in the wild. The pack mentality. It's frightening. Humans can be extremely frightening.
What did you do?
I put her in a sleep hold.
Gaither picks her up with his forearm under her chin, where you restrict the airway until the person passes out. He then tapes a sheet over her head and puts her in a closet. They go check on her a little while later and discover that she's dead.
So now they have a dead body in the closet.
Now they're in panic mode. What are we going to do?
We put her in the bathtub.
The bathtub? Why?
Because we were supposed to cut her up.
Johnny Sweet suggests that they dismember her body so it can be disposed of. He attempts to do this with a kitchen knife. Neither of these people understand how difficult that is.
It just becomes a disaster. They can't dismember her, so they put her in a tub, like a storage tub, and place her in the closet.
So now we have to get rid of the body.
We put her body in a dumpster.
The dumpster?
It's just so heartless.
Oh, wow. I was shocked that these young people just say, let's just throw her body in the dumpster. That was just coldness.
It was cruel the way they did her. Nobody deserves that, but especially not this young lady.
Now, Middleton is faced with trying to recover her remains.
We learned that the trash from that dumpster led us to a landfill down in Southern Virginia.
Now, it's been in this landfill for over 6 months. which means it's buried under hundreds of feet of garbage. Hundreds of feet. The most dangerous thing about a landfill is it produces methane gas.
The specialist said that given the dangers, they ultimately would not engage in the landfill excavation.
The Frasers and Campbells did not get the proper burial for their daughter.
That was outrageous. It wasn't fair to none of us.
I don't feel like nobody deserved to have to lay to rest in a trash landfill. Like, that's just...
Developing in the district tonight, a guilty plea from the man accused of killing teenager Letitia Frazier.
Prosecutors said they had planned to use ABC7 news clips against 25-year-old Brian Gaither. We shot this video as we followed the victim's family leafleting the neighborhood where she disappeared in August 2010. Gaither put his arm around Frazier's mother, offered to let her search this apartment, where he now confesses he and 5 others attacked Frazier and choked her to death.
We believe that she was in that room when the mom was actually in the unit looking for her.
But I didn't know it and I didn't smell nothing, so I figured she ain't here.
That's the part that's just sickening to me, truthfully. That's just crazy.
He actually hugged my mom and said, "Ma, if I knew where your daughter was, I'd let you know." So for me, I'm just like, what type of people are you?
Of all of the cases that I have seen come through the homicide section, this was one of the most tragic. The trial of Johnny Sweet, he was the only person who actually went to trial. I remember it was particularly difficult because this was the first time that the family heard everything. We had shared a lot of information with them, but they had never seen the whole picture put together for them. And it wasn't until that trial that they had seen everything. And I know that was particularly difficult.
I remember one day I went to court and I was actually walking in the building, and I normally would take the escalators, but today I just decided to get on the elevator. So I got on the elevator and the elevator stopped like a level up, and this guy got on like all these boxes and stuff, and it just it smelled like death. And I'll never forget, he got off on the same floor as me and we walked into the same courtroom, and my heart to drop because I knew that was what was left and what was last of when my sister was gone.
Johnny Sweet maintained his silence, refused to make a statement. He was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Mr. Gaither was also sentenced to life in prison. Lainey Bell, she was sentenced to 3 years because she was not physically involved in the event itself.
The rest of the defendants had different degrees of culpability, and Nika Nelsa being the least, and Kamal Hassan and Cynthia Proctor being somewhere in the middle. They received between 18 and 52 years, depending on their culpability.
I mean, I was glad that they caught somebody, but they can never serve a sentence enough that I would feel is justice for us losing her life.
I mean, she was a young lady, a kid, pretty much. She's 18 years old, and she was doing the best that she could. And at the end of the day, she lost her life over nothing.
Did $900 even exist? Probably not.
There was absolutely no evidence ever that she had stolen the money. In fact, she was the only one out of all of them who had a job.
I didn't believe that one bit, because I know my daughter. So if she working every day, she don't need to steal from nobody.
So what is the motive for this crime? Rage, anger, jealousy, something was said they didn't like. Who knows?
I really wish that everything happened differently. I wish she was still here. They took her away from so many people. I'm grateful to have my niece. She's so beautiful and they look like twins. She gonna grow up and look just like her mom, so I'm grateful for that.
Miss her being here, miss her smiling. I think about her every day.
We still celebrate her life every year. And, she's not forgotten. She won't be ever.
Detective Middleton was emotional when I spoke with her about this case because you get that way. There are certain cases that just never actually go away. that will always be with her. It's just the way it is. It is the most difficult part of police work.
With more than 600 square miles of Arctic coast, untamed wilderness, and majestic mountains, Alaska is our nation's largest state. But even with all that land, just over 500,000 people live there.
Half the population of the state is in Anchorage.
Ron McGee was the public affairs manager for the Anchorage Police Department.
The last I checked, we were like the 64th largest city in the nation.
Historically, people have flocked to Alaska in search of riches.
This state has always been about oil.
Along with liquid gold, Alaska was home to the gold rush of the late 1800s. That fostered the first generation of people who came to the state in search of riches. But then there's the other group of people.
In the 32 years that I have been here, I encountered a lot of people who came to Alaska to try and get away from something.
Whether it's the law, money issues, or something completely innocent, Alaska is a place where a lot of people go to escape their past.
We have a lot of the problems that people in the lower 48 have. But Anchorage has always been what I would consider a very violent place. Our rate of violence is much higher than the rest of the nation. We've led the nation, for example, in rapes since I can remember.
Alaska's violent crime rate is more than double the national average. And most of those crimes happen in Anchorage, which is scary for the college students who move there.
The University of Alaska's campus in Anchorage is the largest in the university system. They offer the most majors. And we try to talk to the students and try and make them aware that, especially the students who come from rural Alaska, that this can be a very violent place.
One of those students who came to the University of Alaska in Anchorage, or UAA, was Bethany Carrera.
Bethany comes from this little small community in Talkeetna.
Talkeetna sits about 100 miles north of Anchorage. A town so small that a cat won the race for mayor as a write-in candidate. Can you imagine losing to a cat? So Bethany came from a small town, very small. In 2003, the population was 810 people. Bethany was a go-getter who loved camping, snowboarding, and sailing. Adventure was in her blood. In fact, after graduating high school, Bethany embarked on a year-long sailing trip through the South Pacific. Then she served as a Christian missionary to Thailand and Nepal. But then the 21-year-old decided it was time to go back to school.
Bethany came from Talkeetna in 2003 to attend UAA. She was pre-med. She's a good student. She was a good daughter. Her parents had wonderful things to say about her.
Bethany found a small apartment a couple miles from campus in Bootlegger's Cove. It's a scenic area of Anchorage along the coastline that got its name in the days of Prohibition. That's when barrels of moonshine used to roll off nearby boats. In the early 2000s, the area was popular with college students.
Bootlegger's Cove at that time was considered sort of a trendy place, a place that was, a little more expensive than the rest of the town because it was close to the water.
Bethany's one-bedroom apartment conveniently sat near several trails for hiking, biking, and running, all of which Bethany loved to do.
If you like the outdoors, this is a place to be.
At the time, many of the older homes in Bootlegger's Cove were being torn down to make way for bigger and fancier places. In fact, Bethany's modest 4-unit apartment building was scheduled to be torn down later that year.
Yeah, there's always a lot of development going on around there. It's a place that is recreating itself constantly.
But it worked out for Bethany. She was able to sign a 3-month lease that coincided with her summer school schedule. And that final week of April 2003, Bethany's boyfriend, Joe, helped her move into her new apartment. But by that Saturday, Bethany went AWOL.
Bethany was supposed to pick up her brother from the airport, and she didn't do it.
That was out of character for the reliable and responsible Bethany. As you can imagine, her family was concerned.
And her mother immediately drove about 100 miles from Talkeetna to come to Anchorage and check on her. And when she checked on her, she couldn't find her. She wasn't at home. She found that Bethany had left her cell phone and her wallet in the apartment, and that immediately made her suspicious. You know, no young lady goes anywhere without her cell phone and her wallet.
Her mom also found Bethany's car, passport, and even her favorite backpack at her apartment. But what really added to her mother's anxiety was what she saw outside.
The apartment next door burns. There had been a fire in the apartment, and that immediately made her suspicious.
The upstairs unit of the vacant duplex next door to Bethany's apartment was under construction and had caught fire earlier that morning. The unsettling smell of smoke still lingered in the air.
So immediately she called her husband, and her husband drove to Anchorage, and then her mother called the police.
Bethany's mom told detectives that she last talked with her daughter late Friday night. It was now Sunday afternoon. She explained that her daughter's boyfriend, Joe, had been in town to help Bethany move. But there were no signs of Joe or any of his belongings at Bethany's apartment. Her mom admitted that she didn't know much about Joe. She then asked the detectives if they knew anything about the apartment next door to Bethany's, the one that had recently caught fire.
Originally, they thought that the fire was from electrical natural causes, but this additional investigator determined that the fire had been set intentionally. That made us even more suspicious when we found that out.
All right, so we have a missing 21-year-old woman who lived next door to a building that was intentionally set on fire. Immediately, the Anchorage PD got involved.
My name is Walt Monaghan. I was the chief of police of the Anchorage Police Department. At that time, when we did get a report that she was missing, normally we don't take those kind of reports, most police departments don't, for a couple of days, because 9 out of 10, they show back up. But because of the urgency in this one, we did look into it.
The urgency stemmed from the fact that Bethany hadn't even lived in Anchorage for a week.
Coming from a smaller town where you pretty much know everybody and going into a larger place, you're not going to be as cognizant or aware of some of the dangers that are around you. If there's a person that you should stay away from in Talkeetna, everybody knows about it. In Anchorage, not so. So I think a lot of folks, when they first come to Anchorage or Fairbanks or some of the larger places, they're a little more trusting than most people who live in the cities.
As the police began their investigation, nearly 100 volunteers from Bethany's hometown arrived in Anchorage to search for her.
The family started putting out flyers. They basically papered downtown. You could hardly go by a restaurant or a power pole that didn't have Bethany's picture on it. The first time I saw one of those, I just thought she had such an innocent smile, just a happy, genuine, likable person. And I had hopes that, she'd be okay, like everybody else did.
It had been less than a week since Bethany moved into her apartment, which had no sign of forced entry. If anything, it looked like Bethany had simply left to go run an errand, but never returned. And she was 21 and new in town. Did she go to the bars and not come home? Well, her mother said Bethany wasn't much of a drinker or partier.
We found her purse and her keys and her phone. Everything was there. That kind of added to the evidence aspect of that she didn't just scramble and take off someplace.
A look through Bethany's cell phone gave detectives their first clue.
I believe her boyfriend had just been talking to her.
Bethany's phone showed that one of the last phone calls came from her boyfriend, Joe. So the police got in touch with Joe, who confirmed that yes, he did talk with Bethany that Saturday morning. And that began a long conversation between Joe and the detectives, because they learned Joe was married.
Everyone's a suspect initially. Everyone.
Bethany Carrera was a 21-year-old student who was starting life on her own. On Monday, she moved into her new apartment in Anchorage. By Saturday, she was nowhere to be found. Ron McGee worked for the Anchorage PD.
This young lady was completely harmless. She was the kind of young lady that everyone would like to have as a daughter. She comes from this little small community in Talkeetna. For a lot of people who were raised in rural Alaska, Anchorage can be a little bit of a rude awakening. I always say the biggest danger in Alaska is the human animals.
And of course that was the fear, that someone had done something to Bethany. The normally reliable Bethany was supposed to pick up her brother from the airport that weekend. But she never showed up. It left her family wondering, where's Bethany?
She didn't want to disappear. I think everybody was on edge. The Talkeetna community really responded to it. And the people here in Anchorage got involved in it too, particularly the students out of the university. We had a lot of students in the university that were distributing flyers and posting them all over the campus.
Flyers with Bethany's smiling face next to the ominous word, missing, went up all over town. It was a scary time for Bethany's parents, who struggled to stay positive.
I think a lot of times families blame themselves. And in this situation, the family was doing it. They raised a wonderful daughter. They were sending her off to college like so many other families do. They were trying to do what was right for their daughter, and she ends up missing.
It was early May, and Bethany was about to begin summer school. That's also when tourism season was about to begin, which meant the snow was melting and the ground was thawing. That turned Anchorage into a muddy mess for Bethany's search party.
And they were going all around the town, putting up posters and looking in places, trying to find her. And it's very hard work.
Detectives began tracing Bethany's last known whereabouts and got some help from her cell phone, which was found inside her apartment. It was 2003, but even then, no 21-year-old would leave her house without their cell phone, which concerned everyone involved. At the time, Bethany owned a flip phone. A scroll through her phone log showed several calls from that Saturday morning.
I believe she talked to her boyfriend. Her boyfriend was a pilot, and they had a conversation.
Just before 9 a.m. that Saturday morning, Bethany had a short phone call with her boyfriend, Joe.
And that made us suspicious right from the beginning.
Joe lived in Nome, Alaska, which is famous for being the endpoint of the Iditarod dog race. And the only way to get between Anchorage and Nome was by plane. Good thing Joe was a pilot. At the time, Bethany was 21 years old. Joe was well into his 30s. The two used to work together and had been dating for about 6 months. One important thing to note, Joe was married.
That made us even more suspicious when we found that out.
Bethany's parents told investigators they didn't know much about Joe. So detectives questioned Joe, who explained that his marriage was long over by the time he met Bethany. He said the reason his divorce had dragged out for so long was because he and his soon-to-be ex were trying to do what was best for their child. Joe had been with Bethany before she disappeared. He was helping her move into her new apartment. He said the two had a nice visit. He even gave her a puka shell necklace from Hawaii as a gift. But Joe said he flew back to Nome on Friday morning because he had to work. Then things got uncomfortable. The detectives asked about Joe's soon-to-be ex-wife. Did she know about Bethany? Joe said she did, and the two didn't exactly have a happy meeting.
That immediately drew some concern from the mother and immediately from the detectives that responded to it.
Just a few weeks earlier, Joe's wife found Bethany at his apartment in Nome and was furious. She even threw a glass at her, and later called Bethany's parents and told them their daughter was a homewrecker.
I'm a parent too. I have 3 kids and about the same age as she was. And so I just felt for the parents.
Detectives checked Joe's alibi and confirmed he was flying that entire weekend. As for the pilot's soon-to-be ex-wife, there are no roads between Nome and Anchorage. If she were to come to Anchorage, she'd have to fly in, and there was no record of that happening. They cleared both the pilot and his wife, and again left everyone asking, where is Bethany?
There are a lot of people that disappear for a lot of different reasons. And so They wanted to know what happened to this young lady.
Through their conversation with Joe, detectives got a clearer picture of what was happening in Bethany's life. Joe said Bethany had taken a new job cleaning and showing apartments for her landlord, a man named Mike Lawson. And that Saturday, Bethany planned to meet with Mike so he could train her.
The detective, he questioned Mike immediately.
Mike Lawson said yes. He and Bethany spoke early that Saturday morning, but it was to resolve an issue with Bethany's keys. But Mike said he never met up with Bethany that Saturday. In fact, he said he's the one who shows the apartments to prospective tenants, so he wasn't sure what Bethany was talking about.
Mike Lawson said that he was at home with his brother all day watching NASCAR.
After hitting several dead ends, investigators shifted their focus to the duplex next door to Bethany's apartment.
There was a fire in the apartment, and in this case, there was something to that fire.
Early that Sunday morning, a newspaper delivery person noticed the fire and called 911. Originally ruled an accident, investigators later discovered it was no accident at all.
Well, the apartment was set on fire.
When we went to go look at the fire afterwards, we found some evidence.
Walt Monaghan was the chief of police for the Anchorage PD.
And the fire basically was meant to destroy whatever evidence might be inside.
Inside the apartment, the detectives noticed a suspicious patch of drywall, almost like the job was rushed to get done just before the fire.
The material that they used to, that caulking kind of drywall stuff wasn't completely dry and actually kind of depressed because of the heat, the moisture there. It actually shrank back and made us look at it. And as we examined that repair, we found some hair inside of it.
It was almost incredible that investigators located those hairs and fibers within the poorly patched drywall. They were sent off to the lab for testing. And while they waited for answers, they were left to wonder whose hair was in the wall and how did it get there, because the apartment it was found in was vacant. Franco Besnice was a contractor who worked on that building.
Mike Lawson and I worked for a construction company, and the guy calls me up and he says, "Hey, Franco, the building caught on fire, the duplex, the one that I was in to work. It's a two-story. It burnt through the first floor. The flames went up, and even the ceiling was burnt, but it didn't actually break the shell of the whole building. And it was ruled as electrical fire, which really upsets me because I'm the one that does the work, and I don't want to be blamed for touching two wires together. But after examining the fire, I knew that it wasn't me. ATF came in and ruled it as arson, and that changed everything. That drew attention to the whole disappearance next door.
That's when the police started looking at everyone who had been working on the apartment.
The lead investigator starts telling us about Bethany Carrera's missing, and they knew the connection that we had already, that our company is the same company that rented to her, so they're questioning all of us. Little did I realize that they ran a background check and literally everybody right there on the spot.
And wait until you hear what they found.
Out of the 7 guys that I worked with, 5 of them come back as registered sex offenders, which blew me away.
Okay, so there are 5 registered sex offenders working on an apartment building where a 21-year-old girl went missing. And the neighboring building was set on fire?
There's one gal that just rented the apartment there who's alone. So that really drew a lot of attention to our company.
For investigators, the hope was that one of these 5 registered sex offenders might lead them to Bethany. And with any luck, they'd find Bethany alive.
I believe that somebody knows something.
As the Anchorage PD pieced together a timeline of Bethany Carrera's disappearance, they were focused not only on her apartment, but the building next door. Right around the same time Bethany disappeared that Saturday, her next door apartment caught on fire.
The timing of the fire was back to back.
Franco Besnies was a contractor who worked with Bethany's landlord.
Saturday night, the fire broke out. Same building that I did all the work at. So initially, it was ruled electrical fire. Then after more investigation, it was ruled as arson. That changed everything.
Detectives got even more suspicious when they did a background check on the construction crew.
5 out of the 7 were registered sex offenders. I'm sitting there going, what am I working with?
The police looked into all of their alibis, including Bethany's landlord, Mike Lawson. At the time, Mike Lawson was 45 years old. He was tall and husky, but jet black hair he slicked back. And yes, Mike did have some well-documented problems with women.
The lead investigator actually asked him right in front of me, is it okay if I do a visual search on your vehicle? Mike said yes. So they walked over to Mike's vehicle. Mike opened every door, including the hatchback, to his SUV Mercedes. They walked around, did a visual look, and then they drove off. I go back to work, an hour and a half goes by, and I look back over there. Mike never left. All he's doing is walking in circles around his car, looking sort of like what the investigators did.
Can you imagine seeing one of your coworkers doing that? So yeah, Franco found it a little suspicious. And then things got even more strange.
He walked up to me and said, Franco, can you cover for me? And I'm like, yeah, I'll cover for you. He said that he needs to go get an attorney. I looked at Mike and I said, Mike, we don't all need attorneys. I know for a fact that I didn't do anything, and I don't think any of these guys did, but why worry about it, Mike? And he said, well, they're looking at me.
The next day, Mike showed up to work with his car completely cleaned and detailed.
This car is the cleanest I've ever seen it. But you got to understand about Mike. This car, I've known him for several months. Not one time I could ever get in the car. It was so dirty. Papers and boxes. There was never no room except for just him.
And look, this could be one giant coincidence that Mike had his car cleaned a day after the police searched it. But it's what Franco learned about Mike that concerned him.
Mike Lawson is a registered sex offender. He was a registered sex offender that did not re-register himself here in Anchorage. And so I started having this gut feeling about Michael and called Crime Stoppers. They connected me with the lead investigator.
As soon as the investigation began, we started talking to people, and they said that Mike Lawson was a very angry man.
Ron McGee worked for the Anchorage PD.
He's got a lot of problems with women, very violent.
In 1987, Mike was living in Illinois. That's when he was arrested for tying up, beating, and repeatedly sexually assaulting his then-girlfriend. A year later, a jury convicted Mike Lawson of aggravated criminal sexual assault. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison. After serving only 3 years in prison, Mike Lawson was released. That's when he relocated to Alaska. He and his brother Bob then started a roofing company. Right around the time Bethany Carrera vanished, Mike was getting divorced for the 4th time.
Clearly, he's got some anger issues. His wife had just left him. He indicated that he wanted to do violence to women, and that made us suspicious right from the beginning. That made him a suspect right away.
If you remember, Mike had an alibi for the day Bethany went missing.
Mike and his brother had said that they were home all day watching TV, watching race car driving. We were able to get their phone records and determine from their phone records that they were lying to us.
So let's talk about those phone records. On the Saturday morning Bethany went missing, Mike called his brother Bob 7 times. And all 7 calls happened within 3 minutes. Why was Mike so desperately trying to get a hold of Bob? Well, a closer look at these phone calls might tell us. Mike's cell phone had pinged the cell tower near Bethany's apartment. So, Mike may have said he and Bob were at home all day Saturday, but their phone records said otherwise.
They were not telling the truth, that he had not been at home. So, obviously something was amiss there. And of course, that raises more suspicions when you find out that people were lying to you.
That Saturday morning, Mike's brother Bob finally took his brother's call just before 11 a.m. Afterwards, records showed Mike's cell phone returning to his home before traveling some 45 miles north, which is close to Talkeetna. Mike's phone then went silent for hours.
First of all, we didn't have enough evidence to charge him, but we had a suspect, so we had to find other ways to prove that Lawson had been involved in this.
Mike Lawson had lied to investigators, and that's when the police leaned on Mike's brother, Bob. Here's audio of Bob being questioned by detectives.
Do you believe that your brother's involved in the arson or Bethany's disappearance?
I really don't. I just, gut deep down, true blue from my heart, I really don't think Mike's involved. If my brother came home and told me he did something like that, I'd tell you. I'm not going to jail for anybody. I'll tell you that flat out.
So investigators went to Plan B and played hardball. They showed Bob a loan application he and his brother, Mike Lawson, filled out for their roofing company.
Lawson had applied for a loan and had falsified some information on documents during this loan process.
The application had this question: are any of the applicants a convicted felon? Mike was a convicted felon, but he lied. He had checked off the box for no, and by doing that, Mike and Bob had committed fraud, which is a federal offense. Police charged both brothers, but offered Bob a deal. If he would cooperate in their investigation into Bethany Carrera, he'd avoid punishment for the fraud case.
We kept emphasizing to him that this is a young lady and her family wants to know where she's at.
Bob could either join Mike in jail or take the deal. It took some serious thought, but Bob finally came around. He accepted the plea deal and agreed to flip on his brother.
If that's what I got to do, somebody's got to tell the story. If that has to be me, I will. Someday when I'm eulogized, all I want somebody to say is I stood up and did the right thing. I always tried to do the right thing.
I think eventually it got to his conscience and he decided to help us. I'm sure it was a very difficult decision that he had to make, but he eventually did the right thing.
Some 9 months after Bethany Carrera went missing, Bob told the detectives his brother Mike shot and killed Bethany. And he said he knew where to find her body.
I think that basically they just wanted it to be far away from town.
Walt Monaghan was the Anchorage chief of police.
It's about 400 miles from Anchorage to Fairbanks. At mile 129, there's a big gravel pit.
That's where Bob told the caravan of police and search crews to pull off the road.
The crew went out there where we believe that she was disposed at. It's a fairly large gravel pit, and you're surrounded by mountains. By that time, it was wintertime. I think at one point it was like 4 feet of snow.
Bob Lawson led investigators through the deep snow to where he claimed he and his brother Mike dumped Bethany's body 9 months earlier. After 4 hours of searching the gravel pit, which was the length of 2 football fields, they called off their search.
We knew that she was there, but we had to wait until the snow melted.
With the search on hold, something unexpected happened. Mike Lawson told investigators he was ready to talk. And get this, Mike told detectives that it was his brother Bob who was responsible for Bethany's death, not the other way around. And Mike volunteered to wear a wire to prove it.
If there's anything that could help us find a clue, a lead, a person who might give us more insight, that's always what we try to do.
So now you had 2 brothers blaming one another for the death of Bethany Carrera.
Would you be willing to talk to your brother, and if so, would you be willing to let us tape record that conversation?
Sure.
Join us next week for part 2 of the search for Bethany Carrera. I'm Sloan Glass. That's next time on American Homicide. two brothers are blaming one another for the murder of a college student.
I can't imagine what an agonizing decision that would be, to have to squeal on your brother like that. But your brother's done a terrible thing. Your brother's done a horrible thing.
Anchorage police have to figure out which brother was telling the truth.
Someday when I'm eulogized, all I want somebody to say is I stood up and did the right thing. I always tried to do the right thing.
And in the end, one brother would do the unthinkable.
It's a hard decision, but I think it was the right decision to make. And it resulted in this tragedy.
Today, we're in Anchorage, Alaska for the conclusion of the search for Bethany Carrera. I'm Sloan Glass, and this is American Homicide. Just a note that this episode contains some graphic content. Please take care while listening.
Alaska is a place where people disappear and where people find bodies in the springtime. We have really high rates of violence against women, and women become victims of violent crime a lot.
Journalist Julia O'Malley covered the case of 21-year-old Bethany Carrera.
Bethany was a college student coming to Anchorage, looking for a place to stay. It must have felt pretty exciting, snagging a job, getting furniture, setting up.
Bethany's move to Anchorage was supposed to be exciting, but instead, she disappeared.
So it wasn't somebody who had lost touch with their family and gone up to Alaska and just kind of quit talking to anybody. It was somebody who needed to pick her brother up from the airport and who had a plan with her mom the next morning and was supposed to call her boyfriend. You know, she was somebody who was watched after and very connected to other people. So when she just dropped out of her life, it just seemed very apparent that something had happened to her.
Inside Bethany's apartment were her keys, cell phone, and purse.
It was as if she had gone out to take out the trash and just not ever come back.
Detectives were looking at Bethany's property manager, Mike Lawson, and his brother, Bob, as suspects.
The Lawsons were just these really shady characters.
If you remember from the last episode, Mike Lawson served time in prison for sexually assaulting his girlfriend back in the 1980s. After his release, Mike moved to Alaska and started a roofing business with his brother, Bob.
And the cops were looking for something to bring him in on so that they could have some leverage to see if they could get one of them to talk.
Mike slipped up. On a loan application for his business, Mike Lawson failed to disclose that he was a convicted felon, which gave the police a warrant to arrest both Lawson brothers for fraud. Once in custody, detectives hoped that one brother would flip on the other. But no one expected both brothers to flip on each other. First, it was Bob who flipped on Mike. Bob told detectives that on the Saturday morning Bethany went missing, Mike phoned him in a panic. Here's what he told investigators.
He said, I'm in trouble. I need you to help me.
Mike Lawson was in the apartment next door to Bethany's and told his brother Bob to bring him some heavy-duty garbage bags and duct tape. Bob said he was reluctant, but did what Mike asked. And when he arrived, he said he saw Bethany's naked body on the floor.
And I just remember thinking, Jesus. And I said something like, what have you gotten me into here? I said, if I was smart, I'd walk right now. And I didn't.
What did your brother say to that?
Nothing.
He didn't say anything.
He said, well, at some point during this thing, he said, it's not your fault. He said, I did it. And he said, I'm sorry I got you into this.
Bob saw a bowling ball-sized hole in the wall from Mike's struggle with Bethany. If you remember, that's where the police found human hair. And lab tests confirmed it belonged to Bethany. Bob said he patched the drywall, helped Mike roll Bethany's body in plastic garbage bags, and put her in the back of Mike's SUV.
Then that he and his brother took her north to, a gravel pit along the highway and left her body.
Later that night, Bob said he and Mike returned to the empty apartment and set it on fire. Then, the two went out to the bars that evening to establish an alibi. And that brings us to Mike. Mike was Bethany's landlord who, for months, denied having anything to do with Bethany's disappearance. But then Mike said his brother Bob killed Bethany. He even offered to wear a wire to prove it. So now you have two brothers blaming one another. Detectives didn't know who or what to believe, so they came up with a plan. In April 2004, nearly a year after Bethany's disappearance, the police bugged a jail phone line so they could hear the two brothers' conversation. Here's some of what they heard.
This whole thing ain't going away, Mike.
That's Bob telling Mike how this whole thing was eating him up.
You know, I've been drinking every night. I go to the bar. I 2 shots of Crown to every beer. I just need to talk to you. I don't know how we can talk about this, but
I don't want to talk unless I can talk to you stark-ass naked in a room where I know you're not wearing a wire and nothing's bugged.
I know it's hard to hear, but Mike told his brother Bob he's not talking unless he was sure Bob wasn't wearing a wire.
well, I don't know how in the hell that would ever happen.
Here's more from Bob.
Mike, I'm just trying to understand. I haven't been able to talk to you. We never talked about it.
Yes, we did. Yeah, we did. Your mom was a word.
Mike told Bob that they did talk about what happened and that Mum was the word. And then Mike went off.
Don't you get it? You're their star witness. You're their pupil. You stumped me. Don't you get it? Showed for the cat story, the kitty litter, you showed everything.
You may have missed it, but Mike yelled at Bob for telling the cops what the cat buried in the kitty litter. Well, that's not a direct confession. It's the closest thing to Mike saying they threw Bethany's body in the gravel pit. And then Mike revealed something that would completely change the way investigators pursued the case.
But there was something that happened before that you don't know about that I'm not taking you into before she ever showed up.
Again, and I know it's tough to hear this audio, but Mike said something happened before she, meaning Bethany, ever showed up.
Just give me a name, Mike. Who was there?
Me.
And who else?
Coca-Cola.
Mike was there with Coca-Cola. Well, the cops translated that to cocaine. And that's important because that morning, Bethany was supposed to meet Mike at a vacant apartment in her building. And she may have unknowingly walked into a drug deal.
Can I ask you one more question?
Yeah.
Was there any sex involved?
No.
I'm just trying to figure out why there's no clothes.
No running.
No what?
No running.
No running?
Get away.
Oh.
Mike claimed Bethany wasn't wearing clothes, so she wouldn't run away. And before their call ended, Mike wanted to make sure Bob wasn't cooperating with the cops.
No, I'm not.
You swear on Mom's grave.
I swear on Mom's grave.
And then Bob had one final thing to say to his brother.
I want to be able to tell you I love you, Mike.
I love you too, Bob.
The secret recording confirmed everything the police had suspected about Mike Lawson. That he was responsible for killing Bethany Carrera, not his brother, Bob.
They allowed us to wire them, and they were very incriminating conversations. So that is essentially what sealed the case.
Ron McGee worked for the Anchorage PD. They were still searching for Bethany's body. In early 2004, Bob led investigators to a gravel pit where he and his brother Mike buried Bethany months earlier.
And this is Alaska, and there was 3 feet of snow on the ground, and we couldn't recover the body until some of the snow melted. So we had to wait for the snow to melt.
Mother Nature delivered a warm spring in 2004. That meant an early thaw, which allowed the Anchorage police to resume their search for Bethany's body. On May 3, 2004, exactly 1 year to the day she disappeared, a search crew returned to the same gravel pit. Officers very quickly found a blue and black fleece jacket. It was a woman's size small. Then they found a bra that looked like it had been pierced by a bullet. It was near a puka shell necklace. The same necklace Bethany's boyfriend gave her just before she went missing. And then they found what was left of Bethany.
When we found the body was partially clad. She was naked from the waist down. So immediately we suspected that there was some sexual aspect to the crime. We had always suspected that, but this just confirmed in our mind that there was some sexual aspect to the crime.
Finding Bethany's badly decomposed body was a bittersweet moment for investigators.
I think everybody had sort of got to know her a little bit and fallen in love with her. She's such a wonderful young lady. And I think that the sense was of relief that we can bring this beautiful young lady home to her parents. Oh, it's heartbreaking. It's a very heartbreaking thing. And I pray, I don't know them, but I pray that they find some peace with this.
The Anchorage police charged Mike Lawson with first and second degree murder, sexual assault, arson, kidnapping, and tampering with evidence.
And of course, the brother's confession was a big part of this.
It was Bob who would be a key witness in the trial against his brother Mike. But a tragedy would change everything. The search for Bethany Carrera ended exactly 1 year after she went missing. Her body was found in a gravel pit just outside of her hometown of Talkeetna, Alaska, and nearly 2 hours from her apartment in Anchorage.
Not only did they find the actual bullet that she was shot with, the round, but they found her necklace as well as her remains.
Walt Monaghan was the Anchorage chief of police.
Such a beautiful young lady was victimized as she was. Well, she didn't deserve it. You know, losing a child, and actually I lost one, it's a wound that will never heal.
Mike Lawson, Bethany's building manager, was charged with her murder.
She said that she had to go meet the manager, and that was the last anybody heard of her. He was a convicted sex offender, which kind of doubled down on why he should be a suspect. So it was just a matter of doing due diligence and eventually make a case against him.
Prosecutors had a star witness in the case against Mike Lawson, his brother, Bob Lawson, who led investigators to Bethany's body.
The suspect's brother eventually kind of broke down and revealed what he had done to help his brother dispose of the body.
The prosecution moved quickly with this. They wired Bob, recorded incriminating conversations, and had what they needed to convict Mike Lawson of Bethany Carrera's murder. It all weighed heavily on Bob. He saw Bethany's dead body and knew what the future looked like for his brother.
He committed suicide, and that kind of took him out of the picture, literally.
In March of 2006, Bob Lawson's roommate found Bob dead in the garage of the house they shared.
Basically, it boiled down to he was feeling guilty. He was feeling torn between doing what was right and loyalty to his family.
Sitting among a collection of beer and liquor bottles was a note Bob left behind.
To my family, I'm so sorry. I miss my brother so much. Life has become unbearable. I can't endure the pain any longer. I helped do one of the most terrible things imaginable, and I can't live with that. Please take the money in my wallet and my final wages and give it to Mike.
So what was that terrible thing Bob did? Was it helping to move Bethany's body or turning on his brother?
I don't know. I think that he knew what had happened was wrong, and I think that was weighing heavy on him. But again, it's hard to judge family.
Bob's lawyer told reporters that Bob struggled with doing what was right versus his loyalty to his brother.
I think that his personal guilt of what he was feeling and what he had done was his choice to avoid being disloyal and possibly going to jail himself.
Not only was this sad news for Bob's friends and loved ones, but of course, it was also damaging to the state's case against Mike Lawson.
It would have been better if the brother had not committed suicide. I think at the press conference I mentioned, but this case will haunt me for a while. Still does.
All eyes were on the courtroom as Mike Lawson's trial began.
People were worried because Bob Lawson had killed himself. They were worried that the prosecutor wouldn't have enough to go on.
Journalist Julia O'Malley covered the trial.
This case, it's really high profile. The public's has been paying a lot of attention to it. You know, there is a way in which the whole state is a small town, in which one person's child is everybody's child. That might have been one of the reasons why the public followed that case so closely.
The case got even more challenging for prosecutors when the judge ruled to exclude testimony about Mike Lawson's sexual assault conviction from the 1980s.
The jury is just there to look at what the prosecution can tell them and what the defense can tell them about the facts of the particular case and how that applies to the charges, and then consider the evidence and whether it fits. So they're not trying to convict him on a previous crime.
Mike Lawson faced 8 felony charges, including first and second-degree murder. During opening statements, Mike's defense attorney gave a surprising admission.
The defense admitted that he had killed her. They said it was an accident.
Mike Lawson, who repeatedly told the police he had nothing to do with killing Bethany, now said he did do it, but it was an accident.
They were going for a lesser charge than murder.
Mike's lawyer confidently told the jury that it was manslaughter, which carries a lighter sentence, but the prosecutor wasn't having any of it.
Well, the prosecution's story was that she had entered the apartment and she may or may not have witnessed some illicit activity because there was some evidence that he was involved in sort of cocaine trade.
That's where the taped phone call between the two brothers came into play.
Bob Lawson's in jail. He's calling his brother, and he's trying to get him to say if there was anybody with him at the time of the killing.
Just give me a name, Mike. Who was there?
Me.
And who else?
Coca-Cola.
Michael is like all cagey, and he just says, you know, it was me and Coca-Cola. So the prosecution took that to mean that he had been cutting cocaine at the time. They never found evidence of drugs in the apartment, but it was like a theory that was put forward by the prosecution.
Since Bob Lawson took his own life before the trial, that recorded phone call was key for the prosecution. It also meant that Mike's colleague, Franco Besnice, would now be the prosecution's star witness.
For me, I was ready. I was willing to do whatever it took. And when I was testifying, Mike was so frustrated with everything I was answering. And I could see the frustrations in his eyes and the way he couldn't stand me. He hated me so much. He didn't want to even see my face.
Franco told the jury about Mike's white SUV, how it was always filthy, and how Mike suspiciously had it detailed right after his first visit by detectives. And how a week before Bethany's murder, Mike's fourth wife left him. That night, Franco remembered Mike being livid.
He told me that he went out to some bar and had met some woman. And he was basically telling me that when he was with this gal that he just met, that he was beating her while he was having sex with her. To me, that's rape. So you don't meet somebody for the first time and do that and call it sex. That's not what it is. A week later, Bethany Carrera comes up missing. That drew attention to me to really think that he had something to do with her disappearance.
Franco remembers being at Mike's house right around the time Bethany was first reported missing.
So I've been there numerous times, and I've always had free reign just to walk around, do whatever I wanted to do. Never had any problems about where I can go and can't go. For some reason, he wouldn't let anybody, including me, go upstairs. Nobody was allowed to go upstairs. So I thought that was odd. And that was always why I thought he had something to do with it in the first place.
Franco said he eventually relayed his fears about Mike to the police, and that soon afterwards, the police had him wired up. So throughout their investigation into Mike, the police were always listening.
Literally, every encounter that I had with Mike was recorded.
For nearly 6 months, Franco's toolbox and tool belt contained recording devices. And at some point, he thinks Mike caught on.
This is, 2003, and they handed me this, basically like a Walkman little cassette recorder. And at the end of the cassette, it makes this loud beep. And it was so loud. It was beep. And I'm sitting there, I turn up the radio, I roll down the window, and I'm hitting my chest. He heard it, but he didn't know what it was.
And that's when Mike turned on him.
So my boss calls me and said, hey, Mike says you're stealing money from the company. He goes, I got to let you go. So I got fired. And I looked at my boss and said, you're making a huge mistake. I can't tell you anything about what's going on. Maybe someday I will. My own boss turned against me. So Mike had a way to manipulate people into believing that he was innocent or whatever was going on.
Imagine that you're Bethany Carrera's parents, who had to wait a year to lay their daughter to rest. Their family would forever be broken, but their fight for justice had just begun. Bethany's parents sat in court every day.
They're paying close attention. They're just really witnessing it, and it's super hard.
Journalist Julia O'Malley was also in the courtroom.
You gotta imagine losing someone like that and then having to go through the trial and having to hear all the things that happened. Like, no one needs to go through that.
Throughout the trial, there was something else present in the courtroom.
There's this backpack sitting with her dad, and in it were her ashes.
Bethany's favorite backpack, the gray North Face with sewn on patches from New Zealand, Nepal, and Australia, was perched on a chair next to Bethany's dad. Her dad said he thought it was appropriate for Bethany to have a presence in the courtroom.
I think it was important for them, though, to have closure in a certain way.
For 2 long weeks, the Carrera family heard graphic testimony, learning in real time what happened to their daughter. At times, it was just too much for Bethany's mother, who would exit the courtroom in tears.
Bless her parents. I really can't even process what that must have been like for them.
It was a tense setting as prosecutors struggled to make their case without their key witness, Bob Lawson. Their one saving grace was that they could play the 32-minute taped phone call between Bob and Mike.
Don't you get it? You're their star witness. You're their pupil. You something. Don't you get it? Scoop where the cat buried the kitty litter, you showed everything.
You showed them what the cat buried in the kitty litter.
It was pretty damning, just that recording, which they were able to play.
Mike Lawson's defense was that he accidentally shot Bethany. That's where the prosecutor honed in. She said that there was one thing in that conversation that Mike Lawson told his brother. That one thing weakened Mike's defense that he accidentally shot Bethany.
I'm just trying to figure out why there's no clothes.
No running.
No what?
No running.
No running?
Get away.
Oh.
Mike said he accidentally shot Bethany, but he removed her clothes so that she wouldn't run away. In her closing arguments, it was something the prosecutor wanted the jury to think about.
So all this time, you have her sitting there without her clothes on? Alive with a bullet in her chest?
The prosecutor argued that this was no accident, and it definitely wasn't manslaughter. And here's where Alaska state law comes into play. If Mike was involved in some sort of drug activity, that meant a felony was happening when Bethany was killed. When a death occurs during another felony, Alaska law says it cannot be called an accident. It's automatically second-degree murder.
On May 3rd of 2003, Michael Lawson, the manager of those apartments, murdered Bethany Carrera.
Mike Lawson never took the stand in his own defense, and his lawyer did not call any witnesses. Instead, Mike's lawyer told the jury that Mike might have been getting high at the time Bethany unexpectedly walked in, and that she startled him, and that's why he shot her. And the reason Bob walked in and found Bethany with her clothes off? Well, his lawyer said Mike wanted to check her injuries.
I mean, it was clear that he killed her, And he admitted it early in the trial, but why, like what caused it, that never got totally answered for me.
Chances are, if a journalist sitting in the courtroom is thinking that, so too is one of the jurors. And when the case went to the jury, deliberations dragged on for days. 4 days to be exact. And then the judge announced the jury had reached a verdict. Bethany's parents nervously sat next to their daughter's backpack, the one that contained Bethany's ashes. Whether Mike Lawson knew it or not, he had to face Bethany one more time. On the most serious charge of first-degree murder, the jury found Mike Lawson not guilty. On the arson charge, the jury found Mike Lawson not guilty. On the kidnapping and sexual assault charges, the jury found Mike Lawson not guilty. With Bethany's family clutching that backpack even tighter, they listened as the jury announced their verdict of the final charge.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Michael Lawson, guilty of murder in the second degree.
The jury didn't buy Mike Lawson's claim that Bethany's murder was an accident and convicted him of second-degree murder as well as tampering with evidence.
Because that would have meant the difference between like a 20-year sentence for manslaughter or like 99 years.
Mr. Lawson, I sentence you to 99 years.
The judge was really forceful in the sentencing. And it was his opinion that Michael Lawson was a predator, a ticking time bomb, like that he was just waiting to harm somebody else.
Coincidentally, Mike's 99-year sentence was the same sentence he would have received if the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder.
So that verdict was announced. And all along, I was just smiling, knowing that I helped put this man away, and it mattered.
Franco Besnice was Mike's former colleague. They used to play chess together. After the verdict, Franco couldn't help but think about one match with Mike.
Early on, I remember in one of the games, I actually lost my queen, which is for sure loss. And they kept telling me, hey, we got you. Well, I said, no, we're going to continue to play. And I ended up winning that game, which even frustrated me even more. The game of chess is like you must know what the other opponent's doing, as well as have strategy yourself. It actually played forward into the courtroom. At the end, when they were giving him his sentencing, I stood up in the courtroom. As he was walking right by in front of me, I said, "Checkmate, Mike." All along, he didn't know what I was doing. He didn't know my moves. So I thought to myself, what a perfect time to be able to tell him checkmate after he just received 99 years.
Mike Lawson remains incarcerated at an Alaska state prison. He'll be eligible for parole in 2073.
For me, it felt so good to be able to put this man away. And so there was peace for me, unlike peace for the parents. I mean, they lost a child. There's really no peace to that. And I met the father for the first time right outside the courtroom. And he actually looked at me and we were talking and he said that, he goes, Franco, he said, I can't keep going on. The pain that I'm feeling is so bad because I have to forgive him. And I said, you're going to forgive Mike Lawson? And he said, yeah. So that way I don't have to live with this pain. And that was the first time I witnessed a man actually forgive somebody that took something from him. I can't even imagine losing any of my children. But it gave me hope. I'm so glad that I witnessed that because that helped me in my life to move forward. And I hold on to any regrets or anything, things that I do. I have to keep moving forward. And the only way I can is forgiveness, the way he showed me.
Anybody that has gotten to the point where he can kill all these people, including a small child,
there's very little chance he'll give himself up. He's snapped, he's gone beyond, and there's no coming back from where he is now. No coming back.
The hunt for one of Alaska's worst serial killers turned a quiet town into the wild, wild west.
In a situation like this, it's clear to us that this is not going to end well. If we see him, and we're not going to walk out and say, "Hey, how you doing?" This is going to be a gunfight.
Today, we're just outside of Fairbanks, Alaska for the haunting case of End of the Road, the hunt for Michael Silka. I'm Sloan Glass, and this is American Homicide. Just a note that this episode contains some graphic content. Please take care while listening. On a spring day in 1984, 2 Alaska State Troopers stopped their patrol car outside a cabin that belonged to Michael Silka.
I don't remember much of Silka's cabin, but it was junky like most of the other ones over there.
Sergeant Jim McCann was an Alaska State Trooper.
It wasn't some cute little log cabin in the woods. It was just a thrown-together wood shack with a bunch of garbage laying all around it.
Michael Silka's cabin sat in an area off the beaten path, just outside of Fairbanks.
There were these little cabins, and people that had come to Alaska and didn't have much money were staying in those cabins.
The troopers were doing a well-being check on Michael Silka. Earlier, they had received a report that he had been shot and killed by his neighbor, Roger Culp.
That trooper went over and knocked on his cabin door. He didn't answer the door.
That's when the troopers walked around Michael Silka's yard. Although it was a warm late April day, there was still snow on the ground. Footprints in the snow led the troopers to a 3 by 6 foot snow mound.
There were indeed blood spatters on that, but there's a moose hide hanging there, and so I don't know, it could be blood from the moose.
One trooper poked at the mound of snow and then grabbed a sample of the blood to send off for testing. Both troopers then walked back to Michael Silka's front door.
They knocked again, and they heard someone moving around a little bit inside the house. And eventually, a voice said, "Who's out there?" He said, "Alaska State Trooper."
It went quiet for a second before the voice from inside the cabin responded.
And he said, "How many of you are there?"
Both troopers looked at each other, puzzled. One of them yelled back, "There's 2 of us. Can you open the door, please?" The cabin door slowly opened, and a man with dark hair and a scraggly beard peeked outside.
And strangely enough, it's Michael Silka.
Much to the surprise of the troopers, the man identified himself as 25-year-old Michael Silka, the person they were told had been murdered by a neighbor.
We had no idea who Michael Silka was till all this happened.
So Silka, who the troopers believed was killed by his neighbor Roger Culp, was alive, and Roger Culp was missing.
Roger Culp was a guy that disappeared a lot. He was a heavy drinker, and heavy drinkers around here just kind of wander around, and during warm weather they lay down and sleep in the woods. They do all sorts of things.
The belief was Roger Culp would eventually turn up. He always did.
It's not really all that suspicious for a guy like Roger Culp to be gone from his trailer for even a day or 2. So there aren't a lot of alarms going on at this point.
Before leaving Michael Silka's cabin, the 2 troopers had some questions.
They found blood scattered around Silka's cabin.
Alaska State Trooper Steve Heckman.
And he said, "Yeah, that's blood on the ground there. I was skinning a moose. I was skinning out a moose hide or something, and that the blood was from that."
Michael Silka had butchered a moose and said he washed the hides for some of his hunter friends. Those hides are used to make jackets, gloves, and even rope.
If you're in the bush, it would be a very common thing.
The 2 troopers thanked Michael Silka for his time and drove away. Michael Silka waited until they were completely out of sight. Once they were gone, he closed the door. In a cabin a couple doors down, a woman was watching. What she witnessed the previous day had left her paralyzed with fear.
There was an exchange between Culp and Silka, and It was just very uncomfortable.
The previous day, that female neighbor of Michael Silka was outside chopping wood and talking with Roger Culp. The two noticed Michael Silka walk past 3 different times, carrying a pile of guns to his car. On his final pass, Silka stopped where his 2 neighbors were chopping wood, grabbed a long stick, and angrily slammed it against the chopping block. He yelled, "This is how you do it," and then walked back to his cabin. It was a strange and scary outburst.
There was something about him that really bothered her.
It also upset Roger Culp, who followed Silka to his cabin. A short time later, the woman chopping wood said she heard gunshots coming from Silka's cabin.
Which is not an unusual thing to hear in Fairbanks, Alaska. Even in a suburb, you'll hear that sort of thing from time to time. So she didn't think too much of it, except that Culp, she never saw him again.
When Roger Culp never turned up, that's when she guessed those gunshots coming from Michael Silka's cabin was Silka shooting and killing Culp. But she didn't have a phone and couldn't call the police. So she locked her door and claimed to be so scared that she couldn't leave her cabin for days. I can imagine that she felt that she was stuck out in the woods with a psychopath.
She eventually reported what she had seen.
It took her 9 days to report what happened, and by the time she did, the troopers realized their first report was incorrect. It wasn't that Culp may have killed Silka. It was that Silka may have killed Culp.
There was a lot of stuff that was going on, but they got it all messed up.
By the time the troopers returned to Michael Silka's cabin, he was gone.
They never found Culp. They found blood scattered around Silka's cabin that was later identified as being human blood.
So that blood Silka said was from a moose was in fact human blood. By that point, troopers believed Michael Silka had murdered Roger Culp and left town.
Something really bad has happened. And he obviously knew we were looking for him because he got out of Dodge.
When Alaska State Troopers dug into Michael Silka, they uncovered a ton. Keep in mind, it's 1984, and the world was less connected.
Silka had a warrant out for his arrest in Illinois, and nobody knew about that. It wasn't in the national computer at that time.
In 1983, Michael Silka skipped a court hearing for a weapons violation back in Illinois. That led to a warrant being put out for the 25-year-old drifter.
And there was a caution that he was considered to be dangerous.
So let's talk about Michael Silka. Silka grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, but always dreamed of living outdoors.
He was the sort of guy that didn't hang with others. He didn't do well with other people.
That's Sergeant Jim McCann.
Didn't have any close friends that I recall. Everyone thought him a bit odd.
Chicago's Daily Herald newspaper reported that one former high school classmate called Silka a troubled kid who was obsessed with guns. One said he even went to school dressed like a hunter. Another said, you could just picture this guy growing up to do something bad.
Michael Silka, he fashioned himself to some sort of mountain man, some sort of guy that could go out and live on his own.
After high school, Silka joined the Army and was thrilled to be stationed at Fort Wainwright in Fairbanks.
His job was a helicopter mechanic. Some of the other soldiers that worked with him, they described Michael Silka as the guy that would always go off on his own. They wouldn't see him for hours or maybe even days if he could get away with it. He'd just take a knife and a few things and then go out into the woods and try and survive. And didn't get along very well with his fellow soldiers. They thought him rather strange.
Silka became an expert shooter in the Army, but a weapons incident led to his discharge. He then returned to Illinois and quickly got into trouble for carrying a rifle through town.
He's got a criminal record, but they're not really serious crimes, but they generally involve firearms.
By Silka's 25th birthday, he had been picked up for a series of arrests for burglary, shoplifting, resisting arrest, and unlawful use of a weapon.
Not that he used them against people, but that he always had a firearm of one sort or another in his possession or near him.
With court appearances pending at home, Silka left Chicago and drove north into Canada. That's where he was stopped by the police. They found his truck loaded with camping gear and firearms.
They were interested in him enough that they took him to their local headquarters, interviewed him, and photographed him, and then let him go. No one ever communicated that to us.
Michael Silka then headed to Fairbanks, where miscommunication allowed him to slip out of the reach of the police. And the consequences would destroy an entire town. The oil boom brought the first wave of people to Fairbanks during the 1960s. But there's also a completely different group of people that are attracted to the area.
This is the end of the road, basically. It's the farthest north, everything.
Sergeant Jim McCann was an Alaska state trooper stationed in Fairbanks.
I've got a lot of experience living here at the end of the road. You know, that attracts some of the finest people and, unfortunately, some of the worst. It's where some people come to take their last shot at life or to live their dreams or their fantasies.
Every spring, locals in Fairbanks spot the newest crop of what they call end-of-the-roaders.
There's been a lot of bad people come to the end of the road here and commit their crimes.
One such end-of-the-roader was Michael Silka. After high school, Silka joined the Army and was stationed in Fairbanks, Alaska, which fit with his personality. Sandwiched in between his Army stint, the 25-year-old racked up a handful of arrests in Illinois, mainly misdemeanor charges involving weapons.
Got into a situation where he didn't show up for court. There was a warrant issued for him.
Instead, Silka drove up to Fairbanks, where he later was suspected in the disappearance of his neighbor, Roger Culp. To make matters even harder for police, Silka then disappeared. And then, on May 18, 1984, Sergeant McCann responded to a disturbing call.
Our clerical staff called me and said, Sergeant McCann, there's something going on in Manly Hot Springs.
Manly Hot Springs is a small mining town, some 150 miles northwest of Fairbanks.
What they told me was that everyone that had gone down to the landing in Manly Hot Springs seems to have disappeared.
At the time, only about 70 people lived there, and each spring, locals head to the boat landing on the Tanana River to watch the ice break up.
People just go down there to look, especially when you're living in a little place like Manly. There's not much else to look at. It's quite the sight to see, really, when the ice goes out. But everybody that went down to look at the river seems to have disappeared.
A woman reported that her husband and his friend went to the boat landing and never returned. A second person reported that a man, his pregnant wife, and their 2-year-old son also went to the landing and didn't return.
There was a whole family. A husband, a wife, and a 2-year-old child.
And then came a report that a third and fourth man were also missing. So for a town of 70 people to have 7 people go missing, that's 10% of the population.
It was bizarre to think that had happened. I took action at that point.
Sergeant McCann flew out there by helicopter and began searching for clues at the boat launch.
I found one .44 Magnum cartridge case, and I saw a number of dark spots on the ground in the dirt that I knew could be blood.
A nearby tree and a boat parked at the launch were both splattered with blood. Along the riverbank, troopers noticed drag marks and more blood.
Clearly, bodies had been brought up to the edge of the river and pushed off into the river.
A handful of cars were parked at the boat launch, including a beat-up Dodge sedan with an Illinois license plate that belonged to Michael Silka.
And when I saw Michael Silka's license plate there, it was certainly alarming. We did some looking at Silka's car, and we saw a lot of his provisions, some reloading equipment and that sort of thing. It concerned me enough that I thought he's going to come back down that river to get his provisions.
Sergeant McCann and his team spent the night waiting and hoping Michael Silka and the 7 missing people would return.
I have no facts at that point to tell me that these people have been murdered. But I've been to these rodeos before. We know what happened. Now we're really confirming that this guy named Michael Silka killed everyone that came down to that landing.
The following morning, more investigators joined the search. Here's Alaska State Trooper Steve Heckman.
It was a horrible situation, and the fact that there were a little kid and a woman involved in it made it even worse in my mind. You have to say to yourself, who does something like this? You know, there's no motive that would make any sense whatsoever, to me at least personally. I could never find a motive in something like that I would care to even try to understand.
Trooper Heckman joined a team of divers that combed the dangerous Tanana River.
I knew the current was going to be strong, which it was. I knew the visibility would probably be 0, which it was.
The glacier-fed Tanana River was nearly a mile wide and so full of silt that it could easily drag you underwater.
You can be the world's best swimmer, but unless you have a flotation device on or something, you're going to go under, and you're going to go under fast.
If these 7 people were disposed of in the river, he knew the odds of finding their bodies were slim to none.
We were hopeful, but our expectations weren't great. Even one would have been a victory for us. But there again, we didn't find a thing.
You hope that these people are going to show up someplace else, that they got on a boat and went downriver, but I didn't think so.
The following morning, Sergeant Jim McCann received his first lead.
I had received information that Silka had or may have had a silver canoe, a silver Grumman canoe.
Those sleek canoes were popular in the 70s and 80s. And the easiest way for troopers to find that canoe was by air.
I gave instructions to the pilot what we're looking for, that this guy, Michael Silka, may have murdered all these people, could be on the river in a silver Grumman canoe. So when I got into the helicopter, I sat in the back with my M16 machine gun, just in case.
Sergeant McCann and 2 special emergency reaction teams took to the sky in a pair of helicopters in search of Silka.
As the leader of the special emergency reaction team, our SWAT team, I made it very clear to our members that this isn't Vietnam. We're not flying around in helicopters, seeing stuff and shooting. We're law enforcement. We'll only return fire if we're fired upon.
From the sky, the 2 teams very quickly spotted a campsite.
A couple of our Fish and Wildlife pilots reported seeing a tent, a man standing outside the tent, and a silver Grumman canoe beached right near the camp.
The helicopter found a place to land, and 3 troopers made their way through the thick forest to the surrounding campsite. With their guns drawn, they shouted to whoever was inside the tent to show themselves. To their surprise, 2 men emerged.
They're 2 bear hunters, and they're not Michael Silka.
Before the troopers and 2 bear hunters could catch their collective breath, another call came in.
Almost simultaneously, another trooper spotted a silver Grumman canoe with a single individual going upriver.
With their description from this call, it had to be Silka.
In a situation like this, it's clear to us that this is not going to end well. The chances of apprehending Michael Silka were slim to none. You know, anybody that has come to the end of the road and then gotten to the point where he can kill all these people, including a small child, there's very little chance he'll give himself up, that he'll allow us to apprehend him, to take him into custody. This is going to be a gunfight, and we hope that it only ends poorly for Silka, not for us.
On a spring day in 1984, Sergeant Jim McCann got a call that something was happening in the small town of Manly Hot Springs, Alaska. 7 people had disappeared near a boat landing in town. None of them returned. Parked at the boat landing was a car belonging to Michael Silka, who had already been on Sergeant Jim McCann's radar.
So at this point, clearly, we can assume that Michael Silka is not just a murderer, but he's a mass murderer.
They also suspected Silka killed his neighbor, Roger Culp, who was last seen going into Silka's cabin 3 weeks earlier.
We don't know that. We never found Roger Culp's body, but it's logical that he would have done that. And probably took him right across the road and dumped him in the Tanana River.
With Roger Culp and 7 others also presumed to be dead, 2 helicopters filled with specially trained teams of Alaska State Troopers went to apprehend Michael Silka.
We have not only a murderer, but somebody who has made his decisions. He is committed to going out the hard way. He's snapped, he's gone beyond, and there's no coming back from where he is now. No coming back.
2 sets of helicopters closed in on a person believed to be Michael Silka. He was spotted in an aluminum canoe about 25 miles away.
I can't imagine he's going to throw his hands up and say, "I give up."
Silka's boat encountered a downed tree across the river that prevented him from passing, so he docked his boat alongside that tree.
We see somebody in a boat who turns out to be Michael Silka.
Lieutenant John Myers was on the helicopter with Sergeant McCann.
We had heard the stories about how good he could shoot, so we know we're probably looking for a well-armed, good-shooting murderer who had no conscience.
With both helicopters hovering, Michael Silka ducked out of sight between 3 birch trees.
The pilot just kind of swooped down where the people in the helicopter could get a better look, and then a firefight broke out.
Within seconds, bullets were flying in each direction.
We could see that Michael Silka was shooting. We knew that our people were shooting. In fact, we could see bullets splashing around him.
But there was a problem.
Imagine yourself in any kind of a situation where you have the knowledge, the equipment, the training to do something really important, and you can't do it. That's where I was.
This had to be chaotic, and the chances of friendly fire were high.
You know, I'm standing there with a fully automatic rifle in my hands, and I mean, even if I wanted to and tried, I couldn't do it.
The 2 were left to helplessly watch what unfolded below them.
Silka was acting furtively, looking up at them and acting very agitated, concerned. He was doing his best to escape.
On the riverbank below, Silka was trying to conceal himself from the troopers' vision.
Then I heard what is perhaps one of the worst things I ever heard, was our pilot going 1079 AST. That means a dead trooper.
A trooper in the other helicopter was hit by one of Michael Silka's bullets.
My friend, Troy Duncan, was murdered. His head was gone, and the helicopter itself was blood-spattered and bone fragments, and it was a horrible scene. My partner and I were just shocked. I mean, totally shocked.
With 1 trooper dead, that helicopter then left the scene and raced to a local hospital. That left Sergeant McCann and Lieutenant Myers to find Michael Silka.
We couldn't see Silka anymore. So in the meantime, we're circling around, and now we didn't know if Silka was dead, wounded, or ran, but we knew he probably was hit. And then we locate him. He was in the water.
Michael Silka was down in a fierce gunfight that had lasted less than a minute. Troopers shot and killed Michael Silka just seconds after he killed one of their own, Trooper Troy Duncan.
I mean, Troy was a remarkable person. Everybody liked him. Everybody trusted him. Everybody was hurt by his death. But the fact is, everybody did what they were supposed to do, and we lost one. And a really good person. Good man.
The 34-year-old ex-Marine had a wife and 2 children. His remains were flown to Texas, where he was buried next to his mother. Here's Sergeant Jim McCann again.
I can still see Troy Duncan's face, his smile. Just a big old ex-Marine, and a likable guy, good trooper, murdered. People don't understand what law enforcement officers go through, what they carry with them for the rest of their lives.
After a long investigation, troopers concluded what happened at the docks in May of 1984. And the details are really unbelievable. Michael Silka shot and killed a first victim at the boat launch. He then threw the victim's body into the river. From there, he killed everyone else in sight. His motive baffled Lieutenant Myers.
What makes you decide to kill everybody you see? How do you get that way? I don't have a clue. Really, I don't know.
He was committed to dying. He was committed to killing as many troopers as he could before he went out. And he fired 3 shots rapidly. One taking Trooper Troy Duncan right in the middle of his face. These things certainly stayed with me.
Troopers believe Michael Silka was able to fire off 3 shots before he was killed.
And the other 2, when I examined the helicopter later, they were right next to the hydraulic lines that kept that helicopter in the air. And some would say that he was trying to take down the helicopter.
The troopers believe Michael Silka snapped. Over the next few weeks, planes flew back and forth over the river in search of the victims.
The Tanana River has a tendency to swallow up bodies. It's a dangerous river, and these people could be any place.
A month later, only 4 of the 7 bodies were recovered, including one body that turned up 75 miles downstream. None of the other victims' bodies were ever found, including Roger Culp. For those in Manly Hot Springs,
it's not the peaceful little place that it used to be. Before this, I could drive into Manly and people wave at you. It's not the same. These things have a way to resurface in your mind. That memory of these things never dies.
Further investigation led troopers to connect Silka to a murder in North Dakota, a pair of killings in Canada, and the murder of 2 others in Manly Hot Springs. With no known motive, Michael Silka left behind 1 million unanswered questions. With no one to give them answers, the grieving small town took out their frustration on a physical representation of Silka.
The car probably should have been impounded, but in one respect, maybe it was a good thing we left it there. They beat it with hammers, they set it on fire, and then they drove over it with a bulldozer, and then they pushed it in the river. I think that was kind of their way to show some finality to the whole thing. That was something that they just felt they needed to do. Gave them some way to show their emotions.